Hello and welcome to All Geeks Aside. I'm your host Teddy, and this is the podcast where I will take you on an in-universe history of a character or group of characters from comic books, manga, computer games, and even TV and movies in the near future. Now this week I'm going to do this a little bit differently, and I've decided to do one of the DC Universe's speedsters. And I thought that I should do him eventually, since I actually have him tattooed on my arm. And the character that I'm going to be covering is Barry Allen, the Flash. Now, I really like Barry Allen mostly because of how he became the Flash, that he wasn't just an alien or a rich guy, that there was science in his actual creation. So, before I get into his history, as always, I will go over some of his powers and abilities, and first and foremost, he can generate the Speed Force. It's the electrical aura that he has when he's running at full speed, and he is the Speed Force. He's the one who created it in the first place. Now, as a result of that, he also has superhuman speed and reflexes and stamina, but in order for him to keep all of these things at his peak and optimum abilities, Barry Allen never really stops eating, and this is seen a lot. He also has the aura around him from the Speed Force, and this kind of anything that he is carrying at high speed, like let's say he is carrying a victim that is rescuing, that now that person will not be harmed by him traveling at almost the speed of light, or maybe a little bit less at times. He also has superhuman durability. This as a result of the Speed Force. Again, he can take an absolute beating, and he doesn't get crushed under immense weights, or even when he's attacked by like a telepath or whatever. And as a result, he also has an accelerated healing factor, and we will get over this towards the end of the episode, so we'll let that. He has dimensional travel, and this is when he travels at a speed so fast that he is able to travel into the Speed Force and then break between the different Earths. And this is seen in the Flash TV show, and in Flashpoint it is also observed, but for the most part he doesn't do it in the beginning. It normally comes up later on when they actually discuss what the Speed Force really is. Now, he can also generate lightning bolts, or he can control it, his Speed Force lightning that surrounds him, and he's able to launch it as a weapon. And he can also make vortexes, like mini hurricanes coming out of his arms. Now this is something I didn't know, he can negate the anti-life equation, and the anti-life equation is an equation that Darkseid was searching for, and its ultimate goal, it would be to literally end all life as you would know it. Because of the Speed Force, his brain is also working on overdrive. Imagine your brain on, let's say, Alpha Brain from on it, or even someone who took too much Adderall and the brain was working too fast or too hard. So Barry Allen is able to do this all by himself, which kind of comes in handy when he is working as a criminologist. Excuse me. He has enhanced senses, and because of the fact that his agility and his brain is working so fast, he's able to sense things. I'm assuming it's something to do with the Speed Force again. Some people have said that when Barry Allen is walking around normally, and the reason he is so jittery is because that the Earth and time itself is moving slower for him compared to everyone else, so he is able to take in everything all at once and get a little bit faster. Now, Barry the Flash is also able to phase himself through objects if he moves at the resonant frequency of said object. So in using this, he's able to walk through walls, break out of handcuffs, and go straight through people if he has to. He can time travel, which will come up at the end of the episode, and he can kind of fly. but it's more jumping really far. Kind of like how Superman was back when he first began, that Superman was never really shown to fly, but he was shown to jump over tall buildings. Now, let's break it down and get into this episode a little bit, and we'll talk about Barry and his humble beginnings. So, when Barry was a child, he was a super fan of Jay Garrick, who, if anyone knows, Jay Garrick was the original Flash, and in Barry Allen's time, Jay Garrick was seen more as a comic book character as opposed to being an actual member of the Justice League. Now, he is a member of what becomes known as the Speedsters in the Flash family. But Barry Allen wasn't always the speedster. He was born to a Henry and Nora Allen in a small town in Iowa known as Fallville. And he actually had a twin brother. But the twin brother was pronounced dead. But in actual fact, he wasn't dead at all, and he was given to another family known as the Thawns. Now, the Thawns will come up in the future as someone very, very important to Barry Allen and the Flash as a whole. Now, when the twins were born, they were born 2 weeks late. Now, you would think that somebody who is going to be known as the Flash would not be late for anything, but as a result of this kind of makes Barry always late. He has a habit of never showing up on time, and as I said earlier, he was a fan of Jay Garrick, the Flash, and he acted many of his superhero adventures with his childhood friends like most children would do. And unfortunately for Barry, when he was a child, his mother was killed and his father was wrongfully accused of the murder, and this causes Barry to want to prove that his dad didn't actually do it. Now, Barry ends up getting taken in some places it's by Detective West, in other cases it's by a family friend or an uncle, depending on where you read it from. Now, in high school, Barry was very easygoing, just a normal child, and on a first date he went to a carnival, and his date wanted to put a little motion in his life, and she said, "Oh, come on, let's go on this roller coaster." So Barry goes on the roller coaster, and ever since then he is terrified of them, and he and I both share this fear. Now, Barry also had a love for chemistry, but not just chemistry. It was also agriculture that he loved, and he ends up winning a first place prize at a county fair. And this prize ends up being a scholarship to Sun City University, where Barry did end up attending, and after his 3 years he did graduate with a major in organic chemistry and a minor in criminology. I wonder why he took criminology. So while a senior, Barry helped the authorities, the cops, to apprehend a robber, and the robber had robbed a bank, and the police offered him a job at Central City Police Department as a criminologist. Now, this is kind of a little bit of a foreshadowing, if anyone knows, that Central City is the sister city to Keystone City, and Jay Garrick is from Keystone City. So Barry is very, very happy about this whole thing. So Barry ends up moving to Central City, and he gets a apartment. But he, being a scientist, and this also being back in the 40s, it isn't just a regular apartment. It also has a laboratory, because that's what they had in the 40s apparently. Now, while Barry is working at the Central City Police Department Scientific Bureau, or the CSI, he ends up meeting up with one Iris West. Now, Iris West was a photographer for the Picture News at the time, who was taking pictures of a crime scene that Barry was looking over for the CSI and doing his reports. And she's charmed by his honesty and his stability because his job as a policeman, and now he's just an honest man after what happened to his father. And unfortunately, that night, Barry is working on an experiment, and he took a little break. Now, this is where everything starts to go a little bit awry for Barry Allen. All of a sudden, lightning streaks through the window, and he is flung into a cabinet of chemicals, and as a result, he's covered in these chemicals and they're all electrified. Now Barry decides, he just says, "Oh, I'm just going to go home," and he's a little bit dazed and a little bit weary from it, and as he's hailing a taxi outside, the taxi just zooms by him, and then Barry ends up running straight past the taxi as if the taxi was not even moving. And then he stops. And he just sits there and he's thinking. And then he decides that, alright, I'm just going to go to a diner, get a cup of coffee, and everything will be okay. And then as he's in the diner, a waitress is passing him, and she spills her tray all over him. And Barry catches all the things in midair, places them back on the tray, and nobody's the wiser. Nobody saw anything, and she thinks that she was just amazing and was able to catch it. Now the next day, Barry ends up saving Iris from a stray bullet, and there was no question about it. Barry Allen had been given superhuman abilities. So Barry decides that he's not going to use these abilities for evil, because this is the 40s and most people don't do that. He decides that he's going to become a superhero. So Barry designs his costume, because you can't go out and buy them apparently, and he uses a special cold cast polyester that he had developed while he was in college, and it can be molded into miniature forms from a liquid material that, when submerged in a special compound, it becomes sensitive to hydrogen. So there is hydrogen in the air with the moisture, so when Barry exposes his suit to the air, it becomes full size. And when he uses a special ring that he designed and he emits an electrical charge from it, the hydrogen that is trapped in the suit is released, and then it is shrunk back down and has the ability to fit into his signet ring, which now he wears on his finger. So when he needs to become the Flash, he uses his superhuman speed to run really fast and change into the suit on the move. It's kind of like how you wake up in the morning, you're late for work, and you've got to just run out the door and you're throwing on your pants. I can imagine that that's how it happens, and Barry must have at least tripped a couple of times when he did this first. Now, this is where Barry comes up with his name, and since he can move very fast and no one can really see him, he decides to call himself the Flash. And it's also a tribute to his childhood superhero of Jay Garrick. Now, he briefly considers wearing his costume without a mask, because that's how Jay Garrick wore it, and I don't know if anyone remembers, but Jay Garrick was the one that had the World War I helmet with the wings on it, and he had no mask. He didn't care. This was pre-1940s, or at least it would seem to be for him. But he decided that he was going to wear a mask to protect his identity and also of his loved ones, because that's what superheroes do apparently. As a result of Barry being the Flash and one of the earliest superheroes that there is, he becomes a founding member of the Justice League, or Justice Society of America. And here he befriends one Hal Jordan, who is a Green Lantern. Now, I'm not going to get into what the Green Lanterns are or who Hal Jordan is, because I will be covering him in the future. But let's just say that he has a ring. He can make constructs out of his own mind, and he's basically a policeman for an area of space. And that's it. Now, he and Hal Jordan would go on adventures together, and also with the Justice Society of America, and the Flash, Barry Allen, also discovers that not only is Jay Garrick real, but now he's friends with him. And this is around the time in comic books and everything else where sidekicks become more popular. Now, the reason that I believe that they became more popular was because that the sidekicks were usually kids, and kids read comic books. So if kids could become superheroes, then why can't they read comic books with kids as superheroes? So one summer, Iris's nephew Wally comes to visit Iris and Barry in Central City, and he is also a Flash fan, but not Jay Garrick Flash. He's a fan of Barry Allen Flash, and at this point Iris doesn't know that he is the Flash, but she does know that he is friends with him. So they set up a meeting with the Flash and with Wally West. So Wally goes and he asks him a bunch of questions, and Barry obviously explains to Wally everything that happened and how that he was electrified and crashed into a cabinet full of chemicals, and then he became the Flash. And of course Wally wishes out loud that he wished something like this would happen to him. And it just so happened that Barry had a cabinet of chemicals that contained exactly the same chemicals that gave him his powers in his laboratory where he and Wally West were meeting. And of course, a bolt of lightning also strikes Wally West, knocking him into said cabinet full of chemicals, and now Wally West appears to also have super speed and everything else that goes along with it. But the only difference being that Wally West isn't actually as fast as Barry Allen the Flash, because the Speed Force, now this doesn't come up at this point, but I will explain it right now. The Speed Force is shared between all speedsters, and Barry Allen and Wally West at this point in time, and Jay Garrick, there is 3 speedsters at this point, all 3 share the Speed Force, but it is Barry Allen who was the one who created the Speed Force, and we'll get into it later. Now, Barry decides to design Wally a suit, and he decides first you can have a suit that is the same color as mine, and then while he is running out in Central City, he is seen by reporters and people, and they decide to dub him Kid Flash. Now, shortly after, he is given his own suit, and which is yellow as opposed to the Flash's red. So it is the complete inverse of Barry Allen's suit. Now we have when Barry decides to propose to Iris West. And he does so in a most romantic fashion for the 40s in front of a Ferris wheel at a fair. And she does say yes, except Barry has had bad luck and nothing really goes right from losing his mother at such a young age. And now someone by the name of Professor Zoom, who is also a speedster, of course he is, foils the ceremony, and Barry has to hide his identity for a year because he is unsure that he can have children with Iris, and he doesn't want her to know that he's the Flash at this point. But unfortunately, Iris already knew that he was the Flash because apparently Barry Allen likes to talk in his sleep. But Professor Zoom would actually rear his ugly head again, and this time he didn't just foil the whole ceremony and stop them from getting married. This time he ends up killing Iris. Now Barry ends up chasing him through the time stream, but he just left him where he was and he went back to his own time. Now, eventually Barry would end up going on fighting many more villains because it's comic books after all, but he does end up meeting somebody new, and her name was Fiona Webb. However, again, on the day that they were to be married, Professor Zoom shows up again, and this time he says that he will kill the wife of the Flash again. So Barry chases him across the world, and he ends up not showing up for his own wedding. Well, in the end, Professor Zoom does kill Fiona, and Barry kills Professor Zoom because of it. Now, the Flash was charged with manslaughter, and he faced a extremely long trial because, again, this is the 50s, and it's the criminal justice process. It never is swift, obviously. So Barry had his face horribly disfigured in a battle, and the person he battled with isn't really that important. So Barry decides to go to Gorilla City. Now, in Gorilla City, there is one of Barry Allen's most feared adversaries, and that would be Gorilla Grodd, but he was defeated previously by the Flash, and now there is just sentient gorillas who are extremely smart, and it's as a result of humans experimenting on them in Star City at Star Labs. And Barry gets his face repaired. Barry Allen is supposedly been missing, so he decided that he wants a new face, so that now his secret identity, Barry Allen, could be gone, and that he could live out and retire and have a normal life and maybe have some form of normality. So Barry is now brought to the 30th century, where Iris was from and had been reborn. And for about a month or two, they lived in happiness, and thanks to advances in science, because this is the 30th century, Barry gets his old face back, and Iris would later have twins, Dawn and Dawn Allen. Now, as Barry Allen is still technically the Flash and he can still travel through time, he decides that he's going to go back to the future and meet up with Wally West. So he goes back in the past. Yes. And he ends up battling against Professor Zoom. But now there are two Zooms, because Zoom can also travel through time, and he goes forward in time to get a future self, future self goes back in time to get a past self, and they decide that they're going to try and take on the Flash himself, so that he can ruin his life. And Barry fared a little bit better than Wally against the two Zooms, even though they were 1-for-1. And then it's not sure what happens. They chase him through the time stream, and it's done. And now we have Crisis on Infinite Earths. Now, Flash is still in the 30th century, and he notices that everything is starting to disintegrate, that the whole universe is starting to come apart at its seams. There's natural disasters in the 30th century, and there shouldn't be, because they now have scientific technology that are able to counteract said things. Like, I'm assuming that if it is any earthquake for buildings, that they have a counterweight that shakes in the opposite direction, causing the buildings not to move, which isn't really a good thing to have in a building, since it's a big weight that just shakes. And Flash realizes that it's not just his planet at the time that is falling apart, that it is actually reality. Now, Flash returns to the 20th century so that he can warn his friends, the Justice League, and mostly he starts with Batman. And then he's pulled into the antimatter universe by the Anti-Monitor. Now, the Crisis on Infinite Earths is when the Anti-Monitor decides that he's going to eat all of the Earths from all of the different realities. And in doing so, he wanted to make one Earth. So, the Anti-Monitor pulls Barry Allen into the antimatter universe, and Barry is tortured by the Psycho Pirate. Now, I have read this, I can't remember, it has been a while since I read Crisis on Infinite Earths, so I'm not going to get into who Psycho Pirate is, but finally, Barry Allen does just end up using Psycho Pirate against the Anti-Monitor's servants, the Thunderers, if I remember correctly. And he gave them enough time to destroy the Anti-Monitor's antimatter cannon, to run around that cannon as Barry Allen the Flash, and run around it and take it apart, and destroys the outer casing. Now, he runs incredibly fast like he does, and he gets back into the Speed Force. Now, here's where it can get confusing, because in each one of these little futures, there's a little bit of difference. Now, the reason being probably is because Barry Allen was running through time. So I'll go through some of the different things that happened to him. One of the things that is said to have happened to him is that he ends up as an extra-dimensional amnesia character, and he shows up in the Marvel Universe. And that would be kind of odd. And it is implied that Barry is remembering his name as something like the Buried Alien. And he later adopts the alias of Fast Forward. Now, I didn't look into this because it's comic books, and I just wanted to give you the different accounts. Now, the other one is that he transforms into electricity, and he goes back in time, and he actually becomes the lightning bolt that struck Barry Allen to begin with, giving birth to the Flash. And that would be very, very strange indeed. Now, in a storyline, he's also shown that he runs into the Speed Force, and that the Speed Force is actually kind of similar to the Viking heaven of Valhalla, and it is there where all of the speedsters are. And that when Barry Allen is running in there, he meets up with Jay Garrick, Max Mercury, and future versions of himself, because time could be seen as a single moment in the Speed Force, as opposed to a single second passing concurrently, that Barry can see it all at once, and he's able to jump out at different points. Now, Oliver Queen, the Arrow, Green Arrow, meets Barry in a kind of heaven, and here he's seen resurrected, and Hal Jordan also sees him as being resurrected. There was a witch known as the Witch Tessely, and she encountered him in the Dead Legends Cafe, and in death he is portrayed as an amnesiac who doesn't remember his own name but still maintains some of his heroic characteristics. Now, these are all kind of strange, and they're all kind of odd, and if anyone who's listening to this watches the Flash TV show, you do see Barry losing his mind when he comes out of the Speed Force in the latest season, and he ends up getting it back. So we're going to assume that eventually he comes back, and obviously he does. Barry was seen as part of a conspiracy with the sorceress Satana, and she brainwashed Dr. Light, who had mind-wiped Batman's memory of all the events that happened. He's also the one who decided to do all of this, not wanting an instance like when Professor Zoom killed Iris to happen again. And now we have Infinite Crisis. Now, one of the main progenitors for Infinite Crisis was Superboy Prime, who is a clone of Superman on the Prime Earth. So, Superboy Prime wants to get his reality back because the Anti-Monitor destroyed all of the Earths, and now there is one Earth. So, in comes Barry Allen. Barry Allen does eventually fly out of the Speed Force, along with another two speedsters, and they would be Johnny Quick and Max Mercury, who I mentioned was in the Speed Force with him. And he does so to help Barry Allen's grandson, who he hasn't met yet, known as Bart Allen. And Bart Allen is dealing with Superboy Prime at the time. Now, he's trying to take Superboy into the Speed Force. And Bart Allen, who at the time, I believe, was known as Impulse, and I think that's from Young Justice. I could be wrong in his name at this point in history, but he emerges from the Speed Force wearing Barry Allen's costume, but he's not in the exact spot that he left in. He's now in Tokyo, and he's there to tell the other heroes that Superboy Prime has escaped from the universe that he was trapped in, and Bart again reappears to combat Superboy Prime. Now, Barry spent 4 years in an alternate Keystone City with Max Mercury, Johnny Quick, and the alternate Jay Garrick. because at this point in time, everything is all messed up. All the Earths are colliding together, and there's different pieces from different portions showing themselves and coming out and being different, and some people know what's going on and some people don't. And Barry Allen being able to travel between the different dimensions is one that knows what's going on. Now they all meet up along with Bart and Wally West, and they decide that they're going to battle against Superboy Prime. After Superboy Prime escapes yet again, Barry suggests that the still living speedsters have to absorb the whole Speed Force and cross the dimensional bridge back to the Earth before the crisis, before everything is split. And Bart volunteers, and Barry gives him his suit as his last gift to keep the Speed Force contained, and then he stays behind. Now, Barry Allen is in the Speed Force still running, because Barry Allen loves to get trapped in the Speed Force. This is shown in multiple instances over the course of so far, and it's also, if most of the people who are listening to this may have never watched the cartoons or read the comic books, and they know that Barry Allen likes to run into the Speed Force and try and travel through different dimensions and save everyone as a result, and usually doesn't end up the way he wants to. And now we have the event known as Final Crisis. Now, I'm not going to get too much into Final Crisis because I want to do a whole episode on this. It is basically Darkseid is threatened to be destroyed by what is known as the Source, which would be, in comic book terms, basically the writers decided that they're going to rewrite everything, and they're using the Source as the writer's brain, and he wants to stop the war between the fourth world, which is where the new gods live, which would be Darkseid, and the gods of New Genesis. Now, there's many gods, there's many different things, and they are always fighting. And Darkseid ends up on Earth. That's enough of that. And when the Barry Allen the Flash reappears, he just reappears in front of Jay Garrick and Wally West, and he only shouts, "Run." Now, Barry and Wally accelerate 1 month into the future, because Darkseid hasn't appeared at this point, and they find that Darkseid has now conquered the entire world, and they end up getting found by the Female Furies. Now, the Female Furies are Darkseid's harem, his bodyguards, his elites, his best of the best, and he finds that they have anti-life corrupted, which, using the anti-life equation, which not only does it have the ability to kill anything, it also removes free will from anyone who it is put onto. And the women that are put onto are made his Female Furies at this point, which is usually Big Barda, it's Wonder Woman, Batwoman, Catwoman, and Giganta. Now, they eventually, being the Flash and being speedsters, they evade everyone, and they end up at Iris's apartment. Now, Iris has also been infected by the anti-life equation, but as I said at the beginning, Barry Allen has the power to reverse the anti-life equation. And how would a superhero remove an anti-life equation from someone that he loves? Well, of course, Barry Allen kisses her, and Iris comes out of it, and Barry tells her that everything will be okay. Now, shortly after this, Jay Garrick ends up making his way to Iris's home and is reunited with Barry and Wally. Now, once Jay gets there, Barry explains his plan that he wants to use another speedster by the name of Black Racer and bring him to the present day, because he is in the future. So Barry leads him to Darkseid and lets him claim his soul. Black Racer's soul, not Barry's. And Barry wanted to go alone and do this by himself, and he is insisted upon by Wally that he must go with him. And Barry relents, asking Jay to keep Iris safe. So Barry and Wally run, and they hit light speed, and they lead the Black Racer speedster to Darkseid's place in Bloodhaven. Now, Bloodhaven is the home of such heroes from the Bat family as Nightwing. And there will be, also I want to do an episode of Nightwing. But if you want to hear it sooner, you can go over to my social media. I'm at All Geeks Aside on all formats. That's Instagram, Facebook, and even on Twitter. And if you don't want to use any of the social medias, you can email me at allgeeksaside@gmail.com. Now, Darkseid is aware that the speedsters are coming towards him, and Darkseid has a special ability known as Omega Beams, and these Omega Beams shoot from his eyes, and usually anything that they hit is disintegrated, but speedsters are a little bit faster, and Barry Allen, the Flash, and Wally West have been known to be faster than even the likes of Superman, so they have the ability to outrun the Omega Beams. And in this case, they run so fast that the Omega Beams are able to be tracked back to Darkseid, and Barry Allen phases straight through Darkseid, and the Omega Beams hit him instead. And then Darkseid is turned back into the human that he is inhabiting at the time. And like I said, we will not get into this right now because I am going to do a whole episode on the likes of Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, all the large DC arcs. They are huge, and I would like to cover them all so that in the future I can just go, hey, if you want to listen to it, go back and listen to it. Now we have one of the more recent histories of the Flash, and that would be in Rebirth. Now, shortly after all of the incidences in Final Crisis happen, Barry Allen is a little bit uneasy with everything that happened, and he doesn't know how he alone escaped the Speed Force while everyone else is still trapped inside, like the Max Mercury and Johnny Quick. So he decides not to waste his second chance, and then Barry goes to the Flash Museum because Central City is so grateful for everything that the Flash has done. And when he's there, he's met with an old friend, and this old friend had actually died as well, and that's Hal Jordan. And he starts talking with Hal, and they don't feel like they needed to come back. And then Barry told Hal to tell Wally and Jay that he wasn't going to go to any of the parties that were set up in the honor of his return. And then he went off patrolling because that's what he does. So while running the rogue speedster, Wally is encountered by somebody new. A new speedster. And his name is Savitar. And Savitar will turn out to call himself the God of Speed. And somehow he escaped the Speed Force through Barry. But when Barry does manage to catch up with him, Savitar just disintegrates in front of his eyes. Now, recently, Barry and Wally encounter a new speedster, another one, the Black Flash, and he's apparently dead. And shortly after this, Barry becomes said Black Flash, and he realizes that his presence could damage or kill anyone who was innocent, so Barry goes back into the Speed Force, and it's here that he meets up with Johnny Quick and Max Fury again because they're still trapped in there. And they tell him that Alan, it's not his fault that Barry became the Black Flash. That when Max and Barry are then pulled into a pocket universe of the Speed Force, and they find out that the real person behind all of this is Professor Zoom, also known as the Reverse Flash. Sorry, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Now, Zoom reveals that all of this is his doing. That after Barry helped Kid Flash against Superboy Prime during Infinite Crisis, Dawn was able to send a subliminal pulse through the Speed Force to draw what was left of Barry Allen's self-awareness. and that led this hero's reappearance in the final Crisis arc, and this created his negative speed force to contaminate Barry with the reverse speed force, turning him evil. Now, before Barry can fight any further, Zoom fades away. Now, Wally enters the speed force to get Barry back, and then they venture deeper into the speed force, and Max Mercury reveals to Barry that it is himself who created the speed force's source of power. That it was he, in the beginning, when he became Barry Allen the Flash, that it is he that created the speed force. And before all of this, they were running at speeds because of a different means, and it wasn't Jay Garrick, who doesn't really control the speed force but could just run really, really fast, and he also is shown that he's not as fast as Barry Allen, and that as a result of this, Wally manages to catch up with Barry and Max in their pocket universe, and then they all escape together. And as they're in the speed force, they recharge. Now we have Barry, Wally, Jay Garrick, Max Mercury, and Bart Allen, and they all are charging towards Reverse Flash Zoom to end him for everything that he has done. Now, all 7 of them take on Zoom, and even though there's 7 against 1, Zoom is still overpowering them, and he pulls Barry away and singles him out as his main target. And now, this is where everything starts to completely fall apart for Barry Allen, and Zoom reveals to him that everything bad that has happened to him throughout his entire life was all his doing. That it is he who murdered Barry's mom, and it is he who wanted to kill everyone that he ever loved. Iris, Fiona, everyone. He didn't want Barry to be happy because he was never happy. Now, Barry chases after Zoom and is joined eventually by Wally West, and they push as hard as they can to break through the time barrier. Doing so, they reach Thawne, becoming lightning bolts, and turns Zoom into nothing. They stop Zoom from killing Iris, and they're able to get back to the present with Zoom and the 2 Flashes in tow. The 2 Flashes see that the Justice League, the Justice Society, and the Outsiders have built a device that is able to capture Eobard Thawne, Reverse Flash, and then Barry Allen tosses him into the device and it activates it, and then now Reverse Flash is no longer connected to the negative speed force. So they tie Reverse Flash up, and that's it. It's over. Now, as a result of this, and now Barry knows that his dad is innocent of the murder of his mom, he proceeds to bring the evidence to the courts and prove his father's innocence, and now his father is set free. And after this, Barry decides that he's going to go through some other cold cases and see if he can figure out what happened in those cases and if he can solve them like he helped his dad. But before he can do any of this, he runs off to Washington to celebrate with the entire Justice League, who are so happy that Barry Allen is finally home. And then we have a little thing called Blackest Night. Now, I will say this, there are some people that are dead, and most people that are listening to this are going to be a little bit pissed that these characters are dead, and the first person that is dead is, unfortunately, Bruce Wayne Batman. And Barry Allen and Hal Jordan are visiting Batman's grave, and they're reflecting on everything that Bruce Wayne stood for and how they can try and keep secret the connection between Bruce Wayne and Batman. Now, as they're standing there talking, they're comparing their sadnesses of the death of everyone who has died. And then Hal turns to Barry and tells him, he said, "I died a sinner, and you died a saint." Because when Hal Jordan died, he died because he became something very, very wrong. I will get into his character. He becomes Parallax, and as a result, he ends up being killed. And the conversation moves on the world becoming even more dangerous after Barry's death, and that the deaths of such characters as Aquaman, that would be Arthur Curry, and the Martian Manhunter, John Jones. And this cost the Justice League some of its most loved and also even some of their strongest characters, and Hal compares it that these characters were the heart and soul and that they need to keep going. And Barry expresses that the hope for that their dead comrades will return, and he specifically cites that he wants Bruce Wayne, Batman, to come back because, as he puts it, if there's an escape, you can bet Batman's already planning it. Now, later on, Barry Allen and Green Lantern Hal Jordan are off in space because that's where Hal Jordan is, and they end up fighting John Jones, who, as I said just a second ago, has been killed already. And when they find him, he's got this black aura around him, and then they go back to Bruce Wayne's grave and they find this black form that is coagulating around it, kind of like blood, and it starts to corrupt Bruce Wayne's body, bringing him back to life. But not really back to life, more back reanimated. Doesn't have his soul, he's just an animated corpse. And later we find that there's also other superheroes who have died that are also being brought back. And we see everyone, including Barry Allen, Wally, and Bart, they race across the whole superhero community that are spread out across the whole world, and they try and warn everyone. But in doing so, they also warn some of their enemies, and in superhero terms, they would be the rogues. And unaware that this is happening, the rogues, the villains, decide that they are going to be preemptive in all of this, and they decide to head to Iron Heights Penitentiary because they know that there were some dead villains there, and if anyone's going to come back to life, it would be the ones there. But they don't know that they're being watched at the time. And the person who's watching them at the time is Mirror Master. Now, the original Mirror Master is now a Black Lantern. And while doing so, all of this, Barry meets with the Black Lantern version of his most hated villain, and that would be Professor Zoom Reverse Flash. And they have a little bit of a fight. And Barry decides that he's going to go to Gorilla City to seek the aid of the ruler of Gorilla City, who is not Gorilla Grodd at the time, it is Solovar. But he's unaware that Solovar also had Grodd's body there. Grodd is dead. Grodd comes back as a Black Lantern. And then they fight. And it's kind of cut short when Barry decides that he's going to just run off to Coast City. After he stops at the city's memorial, where he witnesses the arrival of the ruler and demonic lord of the Black Lanterns, known as Necron. And he is followed by his disciples, known as Scars. And the Black Hand. Forgot about him. Now, the Justice League, the Titans, Wally, and Bart Allen, Impulse, arrive to help Barry Allen stand against Necron. However, Necron reveals that all of these resurrected heroes and villains are tied to him, and he is the one who allowed them to rise again. And as such, they belong to him. And then Necron uses a series of black rings that he had to turn Superman, Green Arrow, Bart Allen, and many, many others into Black Lanterns. So, what is a speedster to do with this? Well, the Green Lanterns end up stepping forward and decide that they're going to deputize some of the superheroes that are still left, and some of the other Lantern Corps also decide that they're going to do the same, but they're not going to do it permanently. It's just going to be for a day because it's comics and that's what we have to do. So Barry Allen is given charge of a Blue Lantern ring. Now, the Lantern rings are able to create constructs from your mind, and then using different areas of your psyche, like as in the Green Lantern is will. So I can't remember what Blue Lantern power needs to be, but we won't really get into it. I guess it's something. And Barry Allen apparently is very, very good at using the Lantern Ring must be because Hal Jordan had told him how to use the ring and what to do with it. So Barry Allen unfortunately has to fight Bart Allen, who had been turned into a Black Lantern at the time, and he creates constructs of Bart and Kid Flash, and the three of them fight Bart Allen, Black Ring, together and are able to subdue him because he's reacting to the images of his past, and they're able to get the Black Ring away from Bart. And unfortunately they are also interrupted by Professor Zoom and the Gorilla Solivar. Now Wally and Walker later join the fight. I don't know who Walker is, I can't remember why I wrote that down there. Later join the fight against all of them. Now after this, Barry and Hal go in search of the country for Prometheus, who escaped after destroying Star City during a battle with the Justice League of America. Now the pair, Hal Jordan and Barry Allen, end up going to Shade, who is a mystic, to tell them where Prometheus is. And Shade reveals to them that Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, tracked down Prometheus and he killed him in cold blood. Now Barry Allen goes and confronts his friend Green Arrow with the knowledge that he has, and Green Arrow runs away using a teleportation device that Prometheus had used to escape during the fight on Star City. Now when Barry eventually catches him, Barry makes a mistake. He tells Oliver Queen's son, Connor Hawke, about what his dad did. Now Connor Hawke, if you remember from the TV show, Connor Hawke already doesn't like his dad being Green Arrow. If he actually knows he is Green Arrow, I can't remember. It's been a while since I've watched that episode. And Barry ends up catching up with Oliver, and he makes another rookie mistake, and he touches Oliver Queen's quiver. And what do any superhero who doesn't really have any superpowers like Batman and Green Arrow, what do they usually have? They usually have a defense mechanism, and Oliver Queen is no different, and his defense mechanism is that his quiver is electrified, and so is the rest of his body, and Green Arrow gets knocked out and everyone gets away. Now Barry eventually reintegrates himself into his life of Central City, because apparently all of this time Barry has been dead, and he claims that he was in witness protection the whole time. And when he does eventually come back, he's given his job back, because that's what comics do. And you're gone for God knows how long, you eventually are given your job back. And Barry comes back, but out of thin air at this time, a old rogue of his, an old foe known as Mirror Master, falls out of the sky and appears out of thin air and is dead. But he's not just dead, he doesn't look his youthful self anymore. He's very, very aged and also dead. And Barry Allen is there to investigate it, because he's already there and he doesn't know what happens. So Barry's, with his super sensitive hearing that he hears another of these portals opening, and Barry transforms into the Flash and runs off to see what's going on. And this time when he gets there, he sees a group of his rogues there, and these guys call themselves the Renegades. But the Renegades tell him that they are not his rogues. They might look like his rogues, but they are actually from the 25th century, and that they are kind of like police officers, and they're there to arrest him. And they said that he's under arrest for the murder of the Mirror Monarch, and that Barry tells him that he didn't kill anyone. And then the leader, Commander Cold, see what they did there, he says, you didn't do it yet, but you will. So after a little bit of a scuffle with the Renegades, they retreat by accidentally. In the process, they end up destroying an apartment building when they jump back to the 25th century. And Barry saves everyone from the building, and then he actually even rebuilds it, and it only takes him a few minutes because it's Barry Allen and he has the Speed Force. And then Barry goes in search of the true killer of the Mirror Monarch / Mirror Master. And then he's attacked by another person from the Renegades, but only before Captain Boomerang shows up, now wielding explosive energy boomerangs, because what's worse than razor sharp boomerangs? Energy boomerangs, so flying lightsabers. And the boomerang fights with the Flash and the other Renegades, and a confused Top, who is one of the Renegades from the 25th century near the top, can spin very fast and create little vortexes, questions his teammates on to whether or not this Barry Allen is actually the man that they're looking for, and then he points out that the timeline is incorrect, that Boomerang should not have been there, that's not how everything went. The Renegades finally corner Captain Boomerang when the Rogues arrive with a giant mirror left by the previous Mirror Master that says, "In case of Flash returns, break glass." Now, an all-out fight breaks out between the Rogues and the Renegades. So they're basically fighting themselves from different times, 500 years into the future to be exact. Now, the Flash confronts the Top, and he warns him that he's the reason that he will kill the Mirror Monarch, and that's because of Iris's death, which he claims will be caused when a giant mirror breaks, releasing the Mirror Lords. And then the Top tells Barry that one of the Mirror Lords will possess Iris and take her away from him. Now Barry races to stop the mirror from breaking with the Top at his side. However, when the White Lantern entity reaches out to Captain Boomerang, telling him to throw the boomerang, Boomerang responds by throwing dozens of boomerangs in every direction, one of which would hit the glass and would break the mirror. The Top tells the Flash to stop the Mirror Lords, while he goes and protects Iris. Flash questions this, and it doesn't make any sense. The Top throws him at the mirror, and he escapes. Now, in the mirror, Flash sees some strange visions of his mother, and outside, the Rogue's Mirror Master tells the others that the mirror is actually poisonous, and that they must run and get away from the poison before it kills him. Now, Barry does end up escaping the mirror, and he's kind of confused as to where are the Mirror Lords, and then he's arrested by the Renegades. So the Top obviously set him up, and then he's transported to the 25th century, where he is about to go to trial for the murder of the Mirror Monarch. Now Barry escapes the 25th century court, and the Top reveals to him that all of these things that he is doing is because Barry Allen put his ancestor in prison, and to be a member of the Renegades you have to have an ancestor with no criminal activity, no arrests, and because of this the 25th century Top is not able to join the Renegades. Now, like I said at the beginning, the Flash, Barry Allen, at the beginning of his life was 2 weeks late, and the Flash would always be late for certain familial events, and even sometimes to work. But as when he is the Flash, he is never late for work. And one morning, this particular morning at that, Barry is late to work because he ends up having to fight Gorilla Grodd at the zoo. And then he is sent to investigate some homicides, and the victim's prints ended up matching the elongated kid. However, the body was that of an old man, and this causes Barry to miss a picnic with his family, with Iris and everyone else. Now, Barry needs to try and figure this out, and he needs some help on this one. So he turns to an old friend who used to work with him at the Central City CSI unit, and that would be his friend Paddy. And obviously, it's not going to go his way, and then Power ends up getting knocked out, and they're attacked by a villain. And this villain reveals himself to be Hot Pursuit. And he changes into the Flash, because why not? Now Barry chases after him, and this is where Hot Pursuit reveals himself that he is an alternate version of Barry Allen. And he explains to Flash that he came from his Earth to New Earth to investigate some weird goings on that are happening across all realities at the time. Now, Hot Pursuit is interested in the goings on with Bart Allen, explaining that he is not supposed to be there, and that he needs to try and figure out what's going on, and that the reason all of this is happening is because Bart Allen is technically from the future and is Barry Allen's grandson, which time travel. It's all strange. Now, Hot Pursuit has a cosmic motorcycle, and he uses this to pull the speed force out of certain speedsters that he encounters, and he does so with Barry, and now Barry ends up falling to the ground. He doesn't lose his speed force, he just gets drained of whatever speed force he has at the time. He's able to get back to normal eventually, and then Bart ends up coming to his aid, and they both are no good against Hot Pursuit because he has a speed force sucking motorcycle. How can the speedsters attack a speed force sucking motorcycle wielding supervillain? So Bart just asks Barry, hey, why weren't you at the picnic earlier? And he just runs off because Barry Allen always runs from his problems. And now later Barry goes back to the crime lab and he's trying to look at some DNA, and he does have DNA that he pulled from Hot Pursuit, and it is proven that yes, this is me, it is an alternate version of me. And then he checks the same with the elongated kid body, and he notices that yes, this was the body of the elongated kid, and he is just older. Now in walks his chief of police, Chief Singh, and he tells him that we have another body, and that this one looks like it's the same as the elongated kid. It's an older body, but when they pull the ID from this body's pocket, they find out that it is the body of a 30-year-old man. They show that in the distance there is a child who witnessed the whole thing, so they took the boy in to protective services, or child protective services. Barry asks his assistant or friend who didn't work at the crime lab anymore, asks Patty, will she take him to the cafeteria and get him something to eat and try and look after him? And she says, no, why don't you do it? Because I don't really work here anymore, so I'm not supposed to do any of that thing. But the boy ends up jumping into Patty's arms, and then they go, okay, fine, you do it. And next, Iris texts Barry and says, need you home, 911. Barry runs home, and his whole family are in the living room. And Iris says that they need to talk. She tells him, hey Barry, you're going non-stop. You can't keep doing this. You're going to end up burning yourself out. You didn't go to the picnic today. You're always working. Why are you always doing this? And Jay Garrick seconds everything that she just said and tells him that every second counts and you need to slow down and live your life. And Wally West then says that Barry taught him something of the same principle that Jay is trying to tell him now, that you need to slow down. You can't do everything all at once. You might be the Flash, but you can't keep doing this. Iris asks Bart if he has anything that he would like to say to Barry, and Bart says no, and then Barry just turns to him and says, I'm sorry I've been so distant from all of you guys. And then Bart just gets up out of his seat and just wants to know why Barry can't be the person that he's supposed to look up to and respect. And then he runs off. And then Barry chases after him. And of course, Hot Pursuit chases after them. And this is where Hot Pursuit tells him that Bart is an anomaly and he has to be sent back to the future. But then Hot Pursuit realizes something. He notices that his special detector is actually detecting something else. And it is not Bart Allen who is the anomaly, it is somebody else. And that somebody else was Professor Zoom Reverse Flash, who was attacking Patty at the time. You see, Reverse Flash decided to turn himself into a small boy, who is the same small boy that Barry Allen the Flash left with his friend Patty, and is now attacking everyone at the Central City police station. So the Flash runs after him and attacks him, and Hot Pursuit goes with him this time, because now he knows that it is not Bart Allen, it is that of Professor Zoom, who is the enemy, and he sucks the Speed Force right out of Reverse Flash and tells the Flash and Kid Flash to evacuate the building as quickly as possible, because all of the speedsters who possess the Speed Force within 100 feet of this will age to dust if I continue this. So they do. And Zoom overcomes Hot Pursuit's attacks, and he loses him. He runs off, and Kid Flash and the Flash pursue Zoom at top speed, but Zoom ends up disguising himself as an old man, and the two heroes lose him once again. So the Flash and Kid Flash then check up on Hot Pursuit's empty suit, because Zoom killed him, because Zoom wants to hurt the Flash in every way possible, and it is then that the Flash reveals to Kid Flash that it was Zoom, Eobard Thawne, who killed his mother in the first place. So they go back to the police station, and Barry checks up on his friend Patty. Patty's fine, and she feels that she made a mistake in coming back to Central City, revealing that she worked as Barry's assistant and that at the time she was in love with him, and she felt that since he was obsessed with his mother's case that he wouldn't have any time for her, and by the time that she came back, Barry had already fallen in love with Iris, and that this closed everything that she loved back in Central City. But Barry finally became more open, and he tells her that not to leave, but she does anyway. Later on, Barry and Iris are having a talk in the coffee shop, and she's concerned that he's becoming a workaholic again, and he explains that he grew out of that because he managed to stop blaming himself for his mother's death. However, with the revelation that Professor Zoom, Eobard Thawne, one of his enemies, traveled through time and killed his mother, he felt that he had to fix everything. And Iris says that he has friends and family and that he can forgive himself for the actions of his enemy. And later that day, Barry goes to leave flowers at his mother's grave and apologizes for his part in her death, and then walks away, and the day ends, and then Professor Zoom's plans to destroy everything that Barry Allen the Flash loves happens. Now we have one of my favorite stories that the Flash is involved in, and that would be Flashpoint. You see, Barry Allen's mom is dead. Barry has the ability to go back in time, so why has he never done it before? Well, he does, and the following is why he shouldn't have done it in the first place. So Barry Allen awakes from his desk as if he just started his day, and he doesn't know why his work environment has suddenly changed. And then he suddenly hears a name on the TV known as Miss Alchemy, who is a rogue's name that he's not really sure of, and that she's in the middle of a felony at the time. Now Barry starts to run, and he falls down a flight of stairs. And this by itself should have been a clue to Barry that something was wrong. But then he's greeted by someone who he knew 100% to be dead. And this was his mom, Nora Allen. And she's there, and she's all flustered. She said, "I thought you were meeting me for lunch." And Barry goes, "I have something to tell you." And she goes, I know. You're gay." And he's like, No, I'm the Flash. And she's like, "Who?" "Fastest man alive, blah, blah, blah." Now, she doesn't believe him, and she just flushes it off to him falling and hitting his head when he fell down the stairs. Now, after some investigation by Barry Allen, it is revealed that some of the heroes, like Superman, missing. Wonder Woman is at war with Aquaman, and we'll get into that in a minute. And his wife Iris is unmarried to him. She's married to somebody else, and she has a child. And he's completely powerless. So the one person that he knows is still around, the one person that he knows that at this point he can turn to for help, is Batman. Well, this Batman's a little bit different. He's more vicious. So Barry seeks out Batman, and he goes to Wayne Manor, but it's not the same. It's completely run down, and it doesn't look anything like the Wayne Manor that he remembers. And obviously, he knows how to get into the Batcave, so Barry Allen goes into the Batcave, and he is attacked by Batman. And Barry proceeds to tell him that, "I know who you are, you're Bruce Wayne and I am Barry Allen and I know your secret. And Batman continues to beat him. He keeps telling him that if you mention my dead son's name one more time, I'm going to kill you too. And this is where it reveals that it is not Bruce Wayne Batman, it is Thomas Wayne Batman. And it dawns on him. The night of their death, they're not killed. Bruce is. So, while Batman is beating the snot out of the Flash, he gets some flashes in his head and he sees the alternate universe. And Barry then has this ring on his finger, which he always has on. Nothing's changed there. And he decides to see what's inside it to show Batman that, yes, I am the Flash. And when he takes out the suit that is held within, it is not his suit. It is Professor Zoom, Reverse Flash's suit. So now Barry realizes that Reverse Flash had a plan to get back at him all along, and this is his way of telling him that, yes, it is me. So Barry convinces Batman to help him become the Flash again. So they set up the chemicals that were there the night that he was turned into the Flash, and they set up a chair that is kind of like Frankenstein's table that can harness lightning. And obviously Gotham is always gloomy and dark and it's always raining. So what's going to be there? Lightning. So they do it and it doesn't work. And Barry Allen awakes on a operating table covered in bandages and third-degree burns, and he tells him that he needs to get his speed back. He has to do it. So Batman agrees one more time, and they do it once more. And this time it's a success. But in the process, Thomas Wayne Batman is knocked back off of the roof of Wayne Manor and is about to hit a fence and be completely impaled, and Barry Allen rushes down and saves him from hitting the fence. So Barry Allen immediately starts to heal because of his super healing ability, which I mentioned earlier, and then he gets Batman to agree to help him find the missing heroes. So the only person that Batman knows that could help them is Cyborg. Now this Cyborg does not work on the Justice League, he works for the government. And he is a goody two-shoes and doesn't like to break the law. So they find him and they tell Cyborg exactly who the Flash is and tells him to search his database and their files to find anything on a Superman. Suddenly, Barry Allen gets another flashback of this universe that he is currently trapped in, and this flashback reveals to him that the meteor that hit Metropolis was actually the spacecraft that was carrying the child Superman and was meant to crash down in Kansas. But when it crashed in Metropolis, it was not found by the Kents. It was found by the wonderful US government. And they took Superman to a special government bunker under Project Superman, and that is where he is being held. So the trio decided they're going to go and free Superman. And they do. They find a big giant door, and on the door is the symbol of Superman, the giant S. And Superman is in there under a red light that is similar to a red sun of Krypton, and Superman has no powers as a result. And Barry has to tell them that Superman is the strongest person on the planet. And they're looking at him, and he looks like he's never eaten a full meal in his life. He's super skinny, and he's never seen sunlight. So they decide to help him get free and release him. And they get outside eventually. They are attacked by a group of US military, special ops soldiers, I'm assuming. They've got special ray guns. And Superman sees the sun for the first time. And Superman being a solar battery, and this is where his powers come from, he absorbs all of this power and he starts to float. And the Flash starts taking out soldiers by running across water. Cyborg starts shooting at different soldiers with his his arm cannon, and Batman starts shooting at him with his pistols because this Batman likes to carry guns. And then Superman uses one of his more deadly attacks, and that would be his heat vision, and starts killing people all around. And now Barry gets another one of his seizure memory spikes, and this time he sees that the war between Aquaman and Wonder Woman is going to come to an end, and that they must stop both of them from destroying the whole world. Now, Wonder Woman took over the United Kingdom and renamed it New Themyscira, and Aquaman wants to defeat everyone, especially the Amazons and the Amazon Queen, who now wears the Queen of Aquaman's Atlantis, because Aquaman's wife attacked Wonder Woman because she was having an affair with Aquaman, and Aquaman's wife attacked Wonder Woman and she killed her, chopping off her head and taking her crown. So, of course, the Atlantean people were in uproar, and they told Aquaman that he must stand against the Amazonians, and everyone just starts fighting. Now, they can't do this alone. And like I said in my previous episode on Shazam, that in Flashpoint that there is 5 children who are required to create Captain Marvel in this point. The 5 children decide that they are also going to help Batman, Cyborg, and the Flash to find Reverse Flash and to try and stop the Atlantean Amazonian War. Now, this is where, again, as always, it starts to go pear-shaped for Barry Allen. Reverse Flash, Professor Zoom, reveals himself to Barry Allen. Like I said before, the speedsters can only share the speed force, and if a speedster is running fast all the time, the speed force is being sucked by that speedster. So Barry Allen tries to run at the speed of light in order for him to break through the time barrier, and he can't. So they know that they have to find him. So they go in search of him, and eventually Zoom does reveal himself to the now foursome, and Barry ends up fighting with him and running around the entire battlefield, and both of them are the only two that are concentrated on each other. And eventually Reverse Flash is stabbed in the back by one of the Amazonian soldiers and then shot and killed by Batman. So it's over. They stop the war between the Amazonians and the Atlanteans to a point, but they don't really stop it. Batman knew that it would never be ended. So Batman gives Barry Allen a letter for his son, Bruce Wayne, and tells him to go, to not let this future be made. So Barry runs back in time and stops himself from stopping Zoom from killing his mom, so that the actions of Flashpoint cannot occur, and then goes back to his own timeline, because obviously that's how time travel works. And as a result, Barry gives Bruce Wayne the letter from his dad, and he tells him of everything that happened throughout Flashpoint. Now, I'm going to leave it here, because anything else after this, you would learn more from reading and more enjoyment. So, if you are enjoying what I'm doing, go over to my social media. I'm on, like I said earlier, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. It's all Geeks Aside on all platforms. And also, I have a Patreon account, which is a voluntary crowdfunding that you can give me whatever you want each month. And as a result, I will continue to do this and continue to pump out shows. I'm going to hopefully get a little bit faster at this. They're also maybe going to get a bit longer. I'm going to have guests on the show. Now, if you would like to have some of my stickers or t-shirt, mug, whatever, I have a TeePublic account, and the link will be in my show notes. That's all I want to say about this week. I do want to say to any of the people who have listened to my previous shows and are following me on social media right now, I apologize about the Deadpool episode. There was a issue with the audio. I will get it out as soon as possible. And thank you very much for listening. My name's Teddy. This has been All Geeks Aside. Tune in next week and there will be hints for that show on my social media starting on Saturday.